episode number 143 of the LSR podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in all of the gaming industry. With me, I have Dustin Gowker. I have Adam Candy. You could follow them on the Twitter machine for free. Smash the button at Adam Candy, 2 E's, no Y, at Dustin Gowker. If you hate yourself, you can follow me at Matt Brown M2. Short one for you guys this week. Not a ton of craziness going on in the gambling world, but we figured we would touch base anyway. We'll get the state roundup as always from Adam. We'll talk a little bit of stuff going on in Russia. We'll see what's checking in with our guys up north up there in Ontario. But Adam, let's kick things off here with a bookie. Some bookieing going on, and it involves some people who played the game.
I have to be honest, Matt, and Dustin and I might be the only two people on Earth who feel this way. We thought this was going to be one of the biggest stories of the year, and it has gone by with barely a pin drop sound.
I don't know if you heard or not, Tiger might play the Masters. So it just,
I did hear that an older man in his late 40s might enter a golf tournament that he gets into on my legacy. Yes. So the bookie ring that the Justice Department ultimately broke up was based in California. This was multi-millions of dollars. And when I say multi-millions of dollars, we're talking about just a couple of customers of this bookie ring having washed $18 million of checks through a check cashing shop. This is massive. But a bookie ring by itself doesn't really get our attention, right? We know it exists. It's part of the reason we talk about the benefits of the regulated market is to get things like this out in the light. What's notable about it is who was involved. The proprietor of this ring was a former minor league baseball player named Wayne Nix, who ultimately was able to enlist 3 separate former Major League Baseball players, essentially as agents. I wouldn't say mules, it's a little higher than that in the hierarchy, but guys who were facilitating bets for a bookie ring that stretched from California down to Costa Rica, because there was a Costa Rican operation running a call center and a website that was essentially the place that most of the odds and bets were being handled. The money was being handled in the United States. We have a story at Legal Sports Report that lays out the whole thing. I would be thrilled if anyone listening who hasn't read it yet would go read it, because I spent many hours inside court filings to try to make this into something understandable. But the Justice Department release announcing these indictments, or I should say these plea agreements, it said that not only were there 3 former Major League Baseball players working for the ring, but that the bettors included current and former professional athletes. They included a Major League Baseball coach. They included a baseball analyst. They included a prominent broadcaster who had to mortgage his house in order to pay off debts, at which time Wayne Nix turned his account back on so he could keep betting. So this is a wild,
That's just good
story.
business, Adam, all right? Like, that's just called good business is all that is.
Yeah, I can't imagine what he was going to have to sell next to pay off his next round of debts. So, again, the story is at LSR right now, but I'm shocked that this thing went by with such a pin drop, because we're talking about former Major League Baseball players who were connected to current and former professional athletes facilitating illegal wagers in the millions of dollars.
I have 2 things here. That one, if we had names, I feel like that would be bigger, right? Like, Adam and I went through some minor league baseball reference sites, and you can maybe figure out who the connections are. And not well enough. I mean, we have initials from the court filings, so you can't for sure. If we have names, I think maybe then you have this it becomes more than just this vague idea that there are people out there connected to Major League Baseball, or former players or players at the time who were connected to this. That's I think that's what's kept it from crossing over into really capturing people's imagination. The second part is this is exactly why, like, we get all this hand-wringing about the regulated market. This crap is going on. It involves players. It involves people very well connected to Major League Baseball, not going on in a regulated market at all as all of this happened. And yes, we've caught a couple NFL players betting in the regulated markets, but there's far more of this, I guarantee you, going on than anybody trying to get through at a regulated sportsbook anywhere in the U.S.
Not the first time, too, that we've heard of the land-based bookies partnering with the Costa Rican offshore to make it more accessible to everybody, having an app that they can bet on to where it's not just, hey, you call up or send a text or whatever or something like that. So not the first time we've heard of that either, Adam.
No. So if you were a customer at any point of Sand Island Sports, consult your attorney. You might be getting a phone call at some point. It's not impossible. But you're right. And part of what makes this so, what's the right word? Not egregious, but what makes it notable is what you just said, that they needed the trading operation running out of Costa Rica to make this run, right? Like, to do this on the scale that they wanted to do it. What was happening was, when someone was recruited into this betting ring, they got their account through Sand Island Sports, the Costa Rican website and call center, which was actually owned by a man who lives in Southern California, but they needed what was already an established offshore operation to be able to facilitate this on the scale that they were running it. So when we talk about the illegal offshore unregulated market, it's not just a matter of who has an account with Bovada. We're talking about things like this too.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. So I hope we do get some names here in short order too, because I do think that would make this a little bit more spicy for sure. And again, read all the words over there over on LegalSportsReport.com. We can't do it all justice here on the podcast. Dustin, we had some people, and not just some people, an enormous amount of people join us in the single game legalized betting markets here over the last couple of days. And they had tastes of betting before. It was through the lottery and it was the parlay and different things like that. But no longer you can bet on single games in Ontario.
Well, you could before at the lottery app Proline Plus in Ontario, but the market opened up on Monday, which obviously is more exciting, and because you don't have one option that is, depending on who you ask, is good or bad. But so now we have a bunch of brands. We have I think about a dozen, probably more at this point, that have launched as of Monday, when they got the go live for online sports betting and online casino to go live in Ontario. That includes some of the major U.S. brands here: MGM, FanDuel, and Caesars. No DraftKings yet; they're trailing the market by a little bit. And yeah, we opened it all up. It happened in the middle of the night. It went live at some operators went live at 12:01 local time in Ontario on Monday morning. Some rolled out a little later, but I don't know. It's very interesting. And maybe it's just because we're in the U.S. and not in Canada. But I also get the sense from people in Ontario, other than the people who are really into the industry, it's like doesn't feel like this critical massive excitement like there is in other places. That's just anecdotal / what I'm hearing and seeing. It doesn't feel like there's this huge amount of excitement. Now it could build over time, but as we've addressed this on this podcast before, people were already betting on Ontario. A number of gray market sites, again, at the Proline Plus, what have you. It's far different from the U.S. market, where the black market existed but didn't have a ton of penetration. The gray market, with people serving Canada not necessarily illegally, but not necessarily 100% legally either. Really, it's a weird dynamic for everything going on. And you have you have a bunch of new brands. You have a bunch of brands that don't have a ton of penetration in Ontario and Canada. It all adds up to an interesting launch, and it'll be interesting to see what we hear and from operators as they report earnings in the next quarter, to whatever reporting we see out of Ontario, to see exactly how this landed, how much we've transitioned the gray market to the white market, and some of how these U.S. brands did. Anecdotally, the Score has done tons and tons of advertising as some of the other U.S. brands, and the Score. This is Nationals play at sports betting in Canada. They picked up the Score for this reason. So a lot of storylines are following. Other than we know that it launched, we have people betting on multiple brands and multiple sites. Now we're still waiting for more information about what the Ontario market looks like. And but yes, we're excited for our cousins to the north and their ability to bet on just about anything they want to, wherever they want to.
I can't shout out Julian. He doesn't live in Ontario. So I typically anything Canada, we shout out Julian, but he didn't live in Ontario. So sorry, Julian. Adam, listen, we talk about every time that a state launches, we just put the arbitrary deadline as the Super Bowl. Like, you want to be live by the Super Bowl, you want to be live by the Super Bowl, you want to be live by the Super Bowl. That being said, listen, as far as Ontario goes, you've only got 10 or 12 games left in the hockey season. And so you're going to get the hockey playoffs. We know hockey, amazing and super popular in Canada. You got the Raptors that are in the playoffs. So as we head down the stretch here in the NBA, and then we're kicking off baseball season on Thursday as well, where the Blue Jays are projected to be one of the very best teams in all of Major League Baseball. So while it's not the Super Bowl, this is a pretty decent little time actually to launch, though.
Yeah, and rumor has it, from what I heard 10 minutes ago, there's a golf tournament this weekend
There is
as well. So,
and a guy that has won before is might play is the word. Yeah.
Yes, Mike Weir, famous Canadian, will be in the tournament, at least for 2 days. So what we're going to see here is, I think, eventually you need to see some pressure from the commercial operators on regulators to begin a true crackdown on the gray market, because that's the only time this is going to become something that looks like a critical mass. And maybe the critical mass doesn't build the way we've seen in other states, where there's a surge at the dam on day one and then it sort of dissipates as the water goes over the dam. Maybe it is a slower build with the river going up to this dam if we start to see crackdowns in that gray market. And what we have seen is that operators like Bet365, who were in the gray market and have come over to the white market, there have been a couple of hiccups when it comes to transitioning bets that were placed before the transition to now. Good story from our sister site over at Play Ontario to check out on that right now. Definitely go check out their coverage as well. So yeah, there's a lot to get excited about right now in Canada, and I think what the real story is going to be how Ontario regulators choose to approach the gray market over the next few months.
It'll certainly be interesting too. I'm interested to see if we get any sort of breakdown and breakout into the various sports and things like that, like we do in some of the states, where we can kind of see where the betting is going. I'm curious as to just how much we're going to see from the NBA playoffs, just how much we're going to see from kind of these opening weeks of baseball season and stuff. So that'll be something I'll keep an eye on as well. Adam, listen, we got a couple of companies that we talk about quite often here on this podcast because they are more kind of behind the scenes type things. So we talk about them more than maybe they are known within just the general public when it comes to the gambling side of things. But Sports Radar and Genius are still doing things in a place that is maybe not so popular right now.
So let's talk about anytime you have Coke and Pepsi, McDonald's and Burger King, right? Uber and Lyft. Anytime you have two giants in one particular industry, you can expect that they will be up in their towers kind of sniping at each other a little bit. And we've heard from the Genius side that Radar is doing this. We've heard from the Radar side that Genius is doing this. And the more that our Brad Allen started to poke into which data companies are still serving Russian interests even after the beginning of the Ukraine conflict and the ongoing Ukraine invasion, well, who's really still in there and who's not, right? And it turns out Brad can find verifiable evidence of at least 4 data providers still serving Russian interests in some way. Now, we've seen a number of companies in all sorts of industries say that they are pulling out of Russia in light of the Ukraine invasion. And turns out that even though Genius has said it's pulling out, but Brad found evidence that there's still at least some related interest that they're serving. Sport Radar has faced a lot of questions, not only about its Russian interest, but about its CEO having holdings in a Russian-based bookmaker. They've said in a statement to us that because a lot of Russian assets are frozen internationally right now, that their CEO can't divest himself of that at the moment, but that he's going to donate the profits, et cetera, et cetera. But the common theme has been, well, we have contracts and we have to service those contracts. Okay, I mean, that's party line. If that's the way your business is choosing to operate, so be it. But it turns out that there's still a fair amount going on with data companies that are serving either Russian bookmakers or other Russian interests, even despite a number of other companies and other industries pulling out.
Yeah, I mean, Dustin, when we look at this, it's kind of one of those things like, yeah, you can definitely pull we got contracts and, we're just going to honor the contracts and stuff like that. But I mean, they have a choice. They could make the choice if they wanted to. They're just choosing not to.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably an out in the contract that gives them a way out if they really wanted to do it. Without having seen all these contracts, I've seen enough contracts in my life to know that there probably is if they wanted to. And yeah, it's all messy. The world is messy. It's an international world. So you kind of get it, but you also are like, maybe this is the amount of economic sanctions against Russia and people stopping business. It's been pretty aggressive, and the fact that a little bit of a small niche of the sports betting world has not been able to get onto that is concerning.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Adam, we said it was going to be a short one, so take us home here with our state roundup.
I will try to keep our roundup brief. We will go on down to Georgia, where once again we had a little bit of hope build up toward the end of the session. And then Matt trying to make this a real short one. I don't even need to explain anymore. Womp womp. It's just about the sum of it. Yeah, we had an opportunity at the end of the session to potentially sneak sports betting in. There was a bill that made its way through committee. Ultimately, that bill was gutted and used for other purposes on the floor. Georgia's been a tricky one. Whether it's political opposition, whether it's cultural opposition, you have a number of pro sports that would like to see sports betting in Georgia. They've formed a coalition. They've lobbied repeatedly, and this just doesn't seem to get a lot of traction in Georgia. This is one of those states that we've seen now 3 years in a row that there's been some momentum coming up to the end of the session, but it's never really gotten terribly close. And keep in mind, if we get momentum that produces something out of the legislature, we're talking about sending something to the ballot that still have to be voted on. And I don't think it's any sure thing that it would be approved in the state of Georgia. Now, where we are seeing some progress is in Kansas, where the conference committee got a hold of a bill that had been approved by both chambers. Of course, if you follow legislation, you know that if a bill goes to conference, that means both chambers have passed a version of the bill, and the conference committee is going to have to reconcile the differences in those bills. And what we see is that the conference came to an agreement, the House approved it, and then they were coming up on a deadline for a 3-week break in the legislature before they come back later in April. And it was sort of like Fred Flintstone at 5 o'clock. Once we hit that deadline, right? We hit midnight on the last day of the session. It didn't matter that it had been approved by the House and it was about to be called up in the Senate. They were like, oh, time to go. We'll pick this one up in a few weeks. So not like it was going to make it so that Kansas was going to have legalized wagering tomorrow, but still, when you have 3 weeks for a bill to sit there, it's not necessarily a guarantee the same way it is when you have a deadline when you're trying to push things through. Now, the governor has indicated she is friendly to sports betting legislation. We expect some momentum in Kansas in a few weeks. What we didn't know through this process, we knew there was a rivalry between the states. We didn't know legislators would be so openly sniping between Kansas and Missouri. And Missouri saw that Kansas is getting something done, and suddenly there's a little more momentum on the Missouri side as they just held another committee hearing today on their legislation. No vote was taken, but they're going to continue to push in the state of Missouri to get something done as well. We expect that to pick up steam with Kansas being so close to the finish line. Hearing rumors that there could be a state famous for its maple syrup that will be dropping a bill here sometime soon. So keep an eye out for that as well. We'll hope to have more at Legal Sports Report in the next couple of days.
That is called a long tease, maybe. That might even be a long tease.
Let's say that's 143 straight podcasts we've done without progress in Utah.
Yes. We've not mentioned with them one time. No,
we've mentioned Utah, but never with progress.
Yeah, never with any sort of progress whatsoever. And just ending things up here with Georgia, Adam. I mean, you go back to them again. Yes, geography, Matt here, but like going back, it's like we a lot of these states where we kept going like, well, look, all you're doing is costing yourself because it's a short drive to here, stuff like that. Like, the closest border is like Chattanooga in Tennessee. Atlanta and Chattanooga, not really all that close. I mean, it's a hell of a drive, if you wanted to make that round trip to go place a bet. Nothing in Alabama, nothing in Florida, obviously, nothing in South Carolina. So it's kind of like they're not really losing any money, right? I mean, like they're not like the money's not heading out of state. It's just like they're just costing themselves money because they could actually be a hub for people coming in from Alabama or South Carolina or Florida to make some bets. So they're really only just costing themselves tons of money.
Matt, rumor has it they had a reasonably good college football team this year.
Yeah.
I imagine they would have liked to take some wagers on the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So just get with it, people. Get with it. You're only hurting yourself. Guys, you should follow Adam. You should follow Dustin over on the Twitter machine. It's absolutely free. It's Adam Candy, 2 E's, no Y, at Dustin Gowker as well. You should head to LegalSportsReport.com as well and take in all of the words for the stuff that we're talking about here. Much more in-depth, and you can certainly absorb all of the amazing, awesome things that Adam and team are doing over there. It is listen, they're doing the stuff that you don't want to have to do. They're going through the bills, and they're listening to the calls, and they're doing all these things. Yes.
We had two guys stay up into the middle of the night watching state legislatures.
See?
I know both of you have done it in the past, and it is not the most exciting work in the world. So go support them.
And that legal filing from the MLB budding ring. I mean, it dropped at like 5 o'clock, even Pacific time, right? And Adam's looking into the night, like working, like reading ridiculous documents, so that you can, so Matt and others and others like you can read 400 or 500 words and understand what's going on without having to read a bunch of nonsense.
They read the nonsense so you don't have to. That's the way I look at it, and I appreciate it so incredibly much. For Adam, for Dustin, I'm Matt. Talk to you guys next week.